Yo, back for a new vid. This is the series where I teach you guys something I've learned today from a book I'm reading, and I'm gonna do it every single day. So this is episode 2. Yeah, man, let's get straight into it. So today I'm gonna be speaking about how habits shape your identity, right? Once again, this is Atomic Habits. So it's a book I've started reading recently, and yeah, like I said, habits shape your identity. So the biggest needle you can move when it comes to your habits is changing the way you see yourself, right? So as humans, naturally, we want to be congruent with the way we see ourselves in our head, right? So if I see myself as someone who's in shape and they take care of themselves, then my actions and my habits are going to reflect that, because I'm going to want to keep in alignment with the image that I've got of myself in my head, right? So that's super important. Like your mind naturally wants to be congruent with how you see yourself. And this can also be on the flip side as well, right? If you see yourself as like a fat, lame piece of shit, it's gonna show in your habits as well, right? You're gonna keep doing those same things. And it's like a feedback loop where if you see yourself that way and you behave that way, the habit just builds and it becomes stronger and stronger, whether it's something that's positive or whether it's something that's negative. So that's something that's really important to keep in mind. Like your actions are a reflection of how you actually see yourself. So like take a minute to just do an audit of your own life. Think about, how do I act? My everyday, my everyday behaviors, right? And then you'll see how you actually see yourself. If you really want to see how you see yourself, take a look at your actions that you do every single day. Identity is the biggest thing. Now, like the more pride you have as well in your identity or a certain part of your identity, the more motivated you are to keep up with that and maintain that self-image. So once again, let's talk about the gym, right? If I see myself as someone who's super in shape, I'm going to be really motivated to keep that image of myself in my head, because it links back to that congruency. And it's the same thing for, let's say you're a musician. Let's say you're a musician and your whole life people have seen you as like, okay, this guy's sick at playing the piano, right? You're going to want to still have that self-image of yourself. So you're going to play regularly. It's going to be a habit to play regularly so you can still see yourself in that light, right? So have habits or have a self-identity that you're going to be proud of, and in that way you're going to be motivated to keep it up. So that's super important. And yeah, if you see me looking off to the side, I've got notes, so yeah, I'm not distracted, I'm focused. So yeah, and in terms of habits, right, every single action that you do, it's a vote for how you see yourself. It's a vote for who you are. And just like in any election, right, the majority vote wins. So if you see yourself in a certain light, it's because your actions have voted in a certain way. Like your body, your brain has like a register of every single thing that you do, right? And each action you take is a vote to a certain direction or a certain identity of yourself. So let's say, for example, I'm going to relate this to fitness, because that's the biggest thing that I can relate to. It makes the most sense for me. So let's say, for example, you want to see yourself as someone who's in shape. You want to be that person who's in shape, right? But if you don't see yourself in that way, it's not going to happen. First, you have to you have to become, right, in order to get the result. Like every time you have a cookie or a donut, or you skip out, you miss out on a workout. Every time, I don't know, you watch porn. Every time you drink alcohol, every time you smoke weed, your mind is keeping a register of every single action you're taking. Your mind is keeping a register of like, yo, okay, that's a vote in the direction of he's someone who's out of shape. It's the vote of someone who's a bum, right? But the more votes you cast in a positive direction, in terms of like, okay, you're going to the gym, you're drinking a gallon of water a day, you're doing your 10K steps, you're skipping out on alcohol, You're not smoking weed every day. You're not waking and baking, right? Either way, the votes that you cast shape your self-image. And if you do enough of that over a certain amount of time, you're gonna have a completely different self-image, whether that's something that's good or whether that's something that's bad. So that's something to keep in mind as well. And listen, like, the majority vote wins. Just like an election, the majority vote wins. You don't need to be perfect, right? But it needs to be the weight of things in a positive way. The votes that lead you to a positive self-identity have to outweigh the votes that lead to a negative self-identity. So that's something that's really important to keep in mind. You do not need to be perfect, right? We're human at the end of the day, but it's got to be something that you're conscious of in order to not make those mistakes again. And to tie all of this in, right, there's 3 different levels of habit and change, right? And the book mentions how, like, the first one is outcome, right? So let's say, for example, you know, I want to get in shape. Let's say I'm out of shape, I want to get in shape. The outcome is me being 10% body fat, having a certain amount of muscle mass, being able to take my top off at the beach and looking crazy, having like a beach body. That's the outcome, right? And that's as deep as most people get. People only think about the outcome and there's nothing past that, right? When you think about the outcome, you're like, in your mind, it's like people actually think that in order to get to that goal, I've got to do some fucking crazy amount of action now. Like, I need to fucking do a 6-hour workout or go to the gym every single day for a month straight. And then they end up getting burnt out and they never reach it, right? They're too focused on the actual outcome. However, if you focus on the process, right, and this is the second level, this is the second layer in terms of habit and change. So first you've got outcome, and then to get to that outcome, you need a process, right? So this is the process. So what do I actually need to be doing every single day? What are my daily deposits that are gonna get me to that outcome of being in shape? It's going to the gym, you know, lifting heavy progressively, drinking water, making sure your nutrition's okay, doing your cardio, right? And these don't need to be like a crazy amount every single day, just enough to keep improving. And over a long enough time horizon, you build up enough compound interest in the bank to where you're just flying, and then you get the outcome anyway because you built the process. If you don't have a process, how are you gonna get there? If you wanna get to the other side of the country, right? Like, well, let's say you want to get to the other side of the country, right? You need a process in order to get there. And what's the process going to be? It's going to be public transport. It's going to be driving. That's the actual vehicle that gets you to your goal. What you actually need to be doing, the action you need to take. Like I said, it doesn't have to be crazy, but just a habit every single day that over a long enough time horizon, you're going to get to your outcome. So that's super important as well. But then the third layer that's even deeper, and it's the biggest driver, and it links back to the whole topic of this video, is your identity, right? When you want to get the outcome, of course you've got the process, but in order to execute that process, you need to become the person who has the outcome. So you've got to become the person who is in shape before you're even in shape, right? This is the whole point, and this is how powerful identity shifting is, right? So every action you take, you're like, okay, would an in-shape person do this? Would someone who's 10% body fat do this? If they would, then that's part of your process, and you implement that to get your outcome, right? You see how it's a positive feedback loop, and linking back to what I said earlier, because it's like a vote, and it's like a part of your life that you're gonna be proud of. If you actually have that new self-identity, you're going to be motivated to keep it up, and it's a positive feedback loop, right? But you've just got to get through that phase of building a new habit, making it stronger, making it part of your daily routine, right? But shifting your identity is going to change the way you actually see yourself. It's going to change your process, and therefore it's going to change your outcome as well. So yeah, man, that's super important. Identity shifting. Never getting too attached to an old version of yourself, or even a present version of yourself. Never get too attached to who you are now, because this is life. It's always about constant evolution, right? You're never going to improve if you're too attached to the way you are now. So that's something that's super important to keep in mind. And yeah, man, that's a lesson, short one for today, but identity, super important. Catch you tomorrow.